Welcome to the Late Night Race Review.
Can you let Russell through, please? Let Russell through.
No, I was ahead. Wait, what?
My advice is to let him through.
Wait, I was ahead. He just ran me off the road.
But that's the rules.
Oh, contact! Max Verstappen into the side of George Russell.
Don't forget to support the podcast by hitting those like, follow and subscribe buttons.
Welcome on in to the Late Night Race Review. My name is Aidan Scott, and joining me today, as always, is Isidro Gonçalves. How are you doing today, Isidro?
Hey guys, doing well. It was a great weekend.
That's good. That's good to hear. So, folks, this weekend we had the Spanish Grand Prix, and going into this weekend would have definitely been a sad one for many of those fans who are pretty much fans of historic tracks, because if you're unaware, this weekend was the last Grand Prix around the Catalonian circuit, as from next year onwards, the Spanish GP will be moving to Madrid, to the Madrid Ring. That's right. Another incredible circuit will be falling victim to the street circuit parade in a quest to remove any future F1 drivers from ever knowing what a gravel trap or an escape road was. But don't worry, for you current iteration of F1 fans, you'll be able to tell your grandkids that you were there during the golden years. But don't worry, it wasn't all doom and gloom, because we actually got some good news this weekend, because everyone's least favorite Canadian, Lance Stroll, didn't take part in this year's Spanish Grand Prix because, well, his hand was sore. I mean, if that excuse works in F1, surely I can actually use that card for my day job. But look, all jokes aside, and coming directly from a team statement from Aston Martin, they actually stated the following about Lance Stroll. Over the course of the past 6 years, we've noticed that Lance Stroll has been experiencing terrible performance. We didn't want to mention it at the beginning because Daddy was paying the bills. But after finally convincing Lance's medical consultant to tell him not to take part in this race this weekend, he actually fell for it. Because let's face it, Fernando does the work of 2 drivers already. I'm just kidding. That actually wasn't the statement. They did say he had a very sore wrist and hand, so he didn't take part. But with all jokes aside, basically, yes, that was it. He just had a sore hand and a sore wrist. But like many of us bankers have experienced in the past. Wait, no, hang on. Bankers isn't the word. I think it's something that actually sounds like bankers. I think it's something like that. Wait, no. That's definitely it. Oh no. Well, who knows? We'll never know. But anyway, Isidro, let's quickly break down qualifying before we unpack everything from the race. And one team I think we should definitely talk about first is Williams, because one statement I actually seen from James Vowles going into this weekend, especially going into the qualifying, was that he mentioned that this weekend in Spain, the car isn't designed for Catalonia. I mean, is that something that, like, when you kind of look at every other team on the circuit, like, realistically, you want to be designing a car that's sort of based around every single track? And I really feel that 2023 Adrian Newey would actually have something to say about that, because we look at that RB19 back in 2023, that car was dominant around every single track. Like, surely you should be able to put together a car that, yes, okay, 80 to 90% of the time can work, but at least if you do come into tracks where maybe, yes, they are having a little bit of difficulty, they can still somewhat put together some good performance to try and bag some points. I mean, you look at Carlos Sainz, hometown hero for Spain, out in Q1, P17, and then you had Alex Albon, P11, out in Q2. What's your opinions on Williams? Like, just through qualifying, we'll touch on their race pace when we discuss the race.
Well, one of the things that Val was talking about is that the Williams are not good in long corners, and the Spanish track is full of that. So that was one of the issues. And comparing the RB19 budget with the Williams, I think Williams is trying, with the budget they have, get the best car for most of the tracks, but it's very difficult to have a car that will be good 90% of the time. And I think Williams was aware that this weekend was not their weekend. They could. It was good that they brought rookie Victor Martins in the FP1 in the Albon seat, but the weekend itself they had issues in most of the practices. They had issues in the qualifying. They had issues starting the race. Albon was complaining about the clutch. So I think Williams was aware that Spain was not their track,
Yeah,
and they are
yeah.
probably focusing more on Canada.
Yeah, like I totally get that, and I understand that theory, but like comparing that, yeah, to the RB19, like yeah, of course, like I think it's obviously like night and day, and obviously Red Bull have a much bigger budget at the time of 2023. Like yeah, it's kind of comparing apples to oranges basically, but I think it's just sort of the theory of that. Well, look, if one guy can design a car aerodynamically to work on 90 to 99% of the tracks, then surely other teams can kind of replicate that in some way, shape, or form. Like it shouldn't, like you kind of look at Ferrari, like they're sort of in the same boat. Like their car is basically, it performs well on street tracks, but then it doesn't on actual track circuits. Like it's very different there. But the way I kind of look at it is, well, surely aerodynamically they should all kind of be looking at this and saying, well, okay, let's try and design a car that works in some way, shape, or form around the majority of these tracks. And then, yeah, okay, like when it comes to one specific track, okay, it might not be the best on the track, but at least we can give it, a fighting chance to get some points. Would I be right in saying that, or do you think it is just really a case that different teams, different budgets, this is what they can do? They can't really design everything at the same level.
Yeah, I think it falls into the budget, because if we see the standings, the Williams is on the top of everyone else. Then we have Red Bull, Mercedes, Ferrari, and McLaren that have a huge budget.
Yeah.
So Williams is doing pretty well considering the budget they have.
Yeah.
And the fact that the James Vowles plan, he said that he's not planning to fight for 23, 24, even 25. So they are most likely on the 2026 championship. That's where they are aiming and investing.
Yeah.
So with the budget they have, I think they are okay of missing out a few points.
Yeah, I get that. Like, I mean, considering like, yeah, what they're fifth in the constructors at the moment, like they are obviously doing something right. But it's just when I hear a statement as bold as that, or as honest and just blunt as, look, this car is not designed for this particular track in particular. We're not going to have a good weekend. I mean, you kind of want to give your drivers a fighting chance, and especially signing a person like Carlos Sainz and then him going out there in front of the fans, coming in P17 and not being able to deliver on points. I mean, that is such a massive blow. And I understand that, yeah, they're moving on to 2026. That's their main focus. But at the same time, too, you look at every other team, like they want to try and do their best for the hometown hero. Like you look at Ferrari when it comes to Monaco, they always try and do their best for Charles. You look at back when Lewis was with Mercedes, they always wanted to try and give him the best car for the likes of Silverstone. Like you have all these dynamics. And when you see Sainz going out there and coming out in P17, I know obviously Alonso is a different story, but it definitely has to be a major blow. And especially then, yes, we do have 2 weeks now until Canada, but I think that's probably a hard thing to pick up from, to go in front of your hometown fans, to then go into Canada with that sort of lack of motivation in my own thing. But it's a pity, but hopefully, look, they can turn that around going back into Canada, because it'd be a pity to start seeing Williams sort of drop off, but hopefully they don't. But moving on from Williams, though, Isidro, Red Bull. That was a team that definitely struggled this weekend, especially in qualifying with Yuki Tsunoda. I mean, he went out there, he did that lap. He even came back into the pits, and on the team radio, he said to himself, wow, I did an incredible lap, until he realized everyone was 6 years ahead of him on the track. Like, I know obviously they said on the commentary that he must have picked up a little bit of floor damage going back into the last turn onto the main straight, but that wasn't really sort of, said that, yeah, look, it was confirmed that it was floor damage or it wasn't floor damage. There was a bit of going back and forward. I never actually really found out what the underlying reason of that was, but how do you feel about Red Bull's performance in qualifying? Like, I know obviously Max came P3, but just that car this weekend in quali, how did you feel?
I think the car was not the best. Even Max doing P3 and qualifying, it shows it was not up there. I mean, the Mercedes was doing much better on qualifying than Max was on that Red Bull. And Tsunoda coming out last, I don't think it's Tsunoda's fault. He proved he's a very good pilot. He deserves to be on that seat. That car is barely drivable, and they need to get there. their stuff together for Canada.
Yeah, they definitely do. And I think the other thing about it is as well, and I was talking to Damien. I know obviously for the fans listening to the episode today, fortunately Damien's not with us today. He hopefully should be back with us for Canada. But I actually was speaking with him yesterday and we were just kind of discussing this in regards to just like that second Red Bull seat. I mean, is it kind of just at the point now where we've got one set of people saying that second seat is cursed? That's what it is. It's a curse on that second Red Bull seat. Some witch doctor came in during the middle of the night during the Perez era near the end of that and started putting spells and stuff on it. Or we have a bunch of people that just say the first car is designed around Max. And to be honest, I really feel, and I kind of want to get your opinions on this one as well, as Joe. Do you honestly feel that, look, it's not a curse, it's just Red Bull have sat down over the last couple of years since Max started dominating the championship, coming in with wins and just said, right, we're designing this car around him and the second driver just has to keep up? Because on the flip side of that as well, you kind of look at how that has really contributed to their downfall. Like, yes, they lost Adrian Newey. He said he was going to retire, then he's going to Aston Martin, but then all these other things started to happen. Other people started pulling out of Red Bull. So yes, the performance started to kind of dip off a little bit. But then when you look at the line of drivers that have come along since Perez, since he started having a lot of trouble with that car, you kind of have to say that, like, is this at that stage where we just confirm, look, they've just designed it around Max. He's the one who's going to win the races and try and get the points. But like other teams, yes, they have a car or maybe the one driver that does the best, but they don't necessarily sort of, design it around that one person. Like every other team can pick up points. Like you look at Ferrari, you look at Mercedes, you look at Williams, you look at all these other teams. Consistently, every team is doing what they can do to bring the drivers, both teammates, close together, but it's always Red Bull where you have this massive difference with Max and whoever the second driver is. Do you agree with me on that point? I know it's a long-winded sort of question, but Yeah,
no, I agree. And that's one of the issues of Red Bull. They are Max dependent. If Max leaves next year for Aston Martin, for instance, Red Bull is lost because they have a car being built around Verstappen, and then the second driver is just an extra thought.
Yeah.
He just needs to adapt, basically.
Yeah.
That's an issue. It's not that Checo or Albon or Gasly or Tsunoda or Lawson. It's just the car is built for Max Verstappen and everyone else needs to adapt, and that doesn't always happen. So, and at the moment, Tsunoda is doing the best he can with the car he have at the moment. Yeah,
no, that's totally true. I agree with that, and I think it's just I really feel it's been a huge contributor to the Red Bull downfall. I think that's what has really contributed to that. But moving on from Red Bull, we do need to talk about one team that we have never mentioned on this podcast during this season. Like, I know you guys have probably talked about them over the last couple of years, but this season in particular, Kick Sauber. Oh my God. Bortoleto getting into Q2 again. He obviously, yes, he did qualify P12 and then Hulkenberg did qualify P15. But if you look at the qualifying times between Bortoleto and the rest of the grid, they were faster than an Aston Martin. They were faster than a Racing Bulls car, an Alpine, a Haas. I mean, Isidro, Kick, let's talk about them. Let's give them their time in the spotlight.
I think Sauber, they're not lucky. They are improving, and we could see that in the practice and the qualifying, the Sauber was really up there. So I understand that they don't want to invest much because next year they'll be Audi, but they are definitely doing a little bit here and there because the performance has been slowly increasing. So if they keep up, they may start grabbing points here and there, not in every single race. I don't think the Sauber is prepared for that, but the P5 today, and maybe they'll get another P10 or a P8 down the road, but they'll definitely get more points. I don't think this was just one time only. Of course, the P5 from Hulkenberg, I think that was more the safety car, but we'll talk about that. But the qualifying, I think the Saubers are they are finding out what they need to do to have a car that doesn't finish last every single time.
Yeah, and I'm really hoping that this season, just with Bortoleto, like I know, yeah, he got into Q2. We'll talk about his race pace when we go into the race, but I really hope just when we look at that final constructors standing, just even when it comes to the drivers' championship, I just want to see Bortoleto ahead of Liam Lawson, because it would just bring me so much delight just to know, looking back at the start of this year, how much of an idiot Helmut Marko was when it came to talking about Bortoleto being worse than Liam Lawson, that he shouldn't even be in F1, or something, some comment that he said about him anyway. But I would love to see that. And I'm delighted to finally see that we can include Sauber in these conversations. It was brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. But look, moving on, of course, talking about the Racing Bulls. Again, look, we do need to note Hajar into Q3, and he did qualify P9. And then, of course, King Dick coming in there in P13. I'm not giving him any room this weekend, Isidro. I am back at it again this weekend when it comes to Liam Lawson. So just be prepared for this. But moving on though as well, look, when it comes to Aston Martin, as we mentioned, yes, look, Stroll didn't take part in the actual main race. He did take part in qualifying. There's no real point in actually talking about Stroll, but going into the Alonso field, coming into this weekend, he's definitely a guy who's been down in the dumps when it comes to performance with that car and trying to get some sort of performance and points out of that. He did put the car into P10. He did get into Q3. Obviously, that is a great result. And especially, look, when you kind of look at that, they had a great qualifying performance in Imola. Yes, Monaco was the same sort of story, but then going into Spain, it's now starting to show that Aston Martin, like, yes, they do have a good qualifying car, but ultimately when it comes to the race pace, that's a different story. But I think, though, when you kind of look at their performance in the race, and which we'll talk about, yes, that was yeah, it was a little bit hairy from time to time, but just how did you feel about just even Alonso? There's no point in talking about Stroll. How do you feel about Alonso during qualifying?
I think the qualifying, it shows what you're saying, that the Aston Martin that does the qualification is a different Aston Martin that gets put up on the road on the Sunday. There's definitely, I don't know what the hell they do, because it's a very good car on a Saturday, and then Sunday it's just a mess. And this weekend, even though Alonso can do miracles, but he did well on the qualifying. I mean, managed to get to Q3. But I think the Aston Martin needs to make sure that whatever they do for the qualifying, they can make it to the Sunday race, because they are missing out a lot of points. And they have a good driver, they have a good car, so they just need to step up their game.
Yeah, big time. No, they really do. And then finally, McLaren, of course, we know the story when it comes to McLaren, but obviously this weekend was just a little bit different compared to Monaco. Piastri and Norris coming in there in P1 and P2. Piastri claimed P1 and Norris claimed P2. That was such an exciting qualifying session to watch between those two drivers, because obviously coming off of the back of Monaco, and I said it, I'm nearly sure I said it in the last episode, or I said it before, Piastri, when, you know, he sees these moments when Norris gets ahead of him, he knows that he needs to do this. Like he is just not giving up that drivers' championship anytime soon. And you could even see that. And one of the things I actually do want to quickly mention before we jump into the race, Isidro, is one of the statements that was made. And I feel that now that I've actually seen it under these circumstances, compared to situations where we seen last year in Brazil, where Norris, let's say, look, we'll just basically call a spade a spade. He did fumble that race start, and he had a very difficult race in Brazil to try and have any hopes of winning the championship last year. But one of the statements that I did see mentioned was that when you look at the fact that he had a somewhat comfortable advantage ahead of Piastri when it came to qualifying. But then when Piastri started to put the pressure on, that's when Norris started to crack. And you could even see that on his last qualifying attempt, he was going around those corners. And of course, he was just over aggressively throwing the car into corners, making little mistakes, doing X, Y, and Z, which then ultimately led him to qualify P2 and Piastri get ahead of him. I mean, is that an accurate statement about Norris? Like, is this now that we've seen actual evidence of this in a fair scenario and a fair sort of situation? Is that a good statement to make about Norris? Does he crack under pressure?
Yeah, I think it has, especially compared with Piastri. Piastri under pressure, he's cool, can handle the problem. If it is fault, he just bottle up and gets on with it. Norris, as soon as he has a problem, it's his fault. He starts, he loses the concentration, and then it just goes straight downhill from there. So I think Piastri in that sense is probably the best bet that McLaren can do. And I know at the moment there's only 10 points separating both, but I can see Piastri being the dual driver championship winner this year.
Yeah, totally. I agree with that. And I think that's how it's going to end up. Just based on this weekend. I mean, there was no other contributing factors to this. There wasn't any issues with the car. It was just very much a case of Piastri put the pressure on and Norris bottled under pressure. I feel like that was just basically it. But moving on from quali, even though it was a very exciting qualifying session, I mean, after watching that, it just kind of led it into Sunday, into the race, where everyone was super excited to see what that turn one was going to be like. But before we talk about the overall race, I think we just need to bite the bullet here. We need to go on into it. And of course, look, we'll talk about them now as the first team as well. Red Bull, that Max Verstappen, George Russell, that whole situation, Isidro. I think we just need to pull the trigger on this one. Let's break it down and let's talk about it, because I really feel that there was a few sort of contributing factors on the build up to this. Now, we'll talk about this incident first, just to get it out of the way, because obviously we want to know, everyone wants to know our opinions on this. And of course, folks, let us know your opinions in the comments below on this one as well. But there was a few things building up to this. So first of all, look, we had the safety car. We had obviously the, Piastri got away, and then Norris and so forth and so on. But then we had the snap oversteer from Verstappen going into the last turn. And then we had somewhat of a similar situation, if I'm right in saying this, with with obviously Verstappen and Leclerc coming up the main straight, kind of reminiscent of Azerbaijan with Sainz and Checo. They were kind of both coming somewhat together. And then, yes, there was that contact. And then going into that first turn, of course, Russell, I've heard a few statements about this already. He overcooked it, went into Max. Max ran off all around the corner into turn 3, what it was. Then turn 4, he was told to give the place back. And then all hell broke loose. I mean, what was your opinion on this, Isidro? First of all, yes, I think obviously, yes, Max is in the wrong. There's no room for any of that kind of behavior in Formula One. But on the build up to that, I've seen a lot of people sort of mentioning, oh, Max was in the wrong. He was doing this, he was doing that. What's your opinion on that whole situation?
I think Max was frustrated that he got the hard tires and he was not getting the performance that he was expecting. And I think that didn't help the situation with Russell. And clearly it's Max's fault. It could be avoided if he just give the place back and probably overtake Russell in a few more laps, in a few more turns, and probably get more points than just one.
Do you think he should have given the place back, though? Do you think, like, going into that turn one, personally, I know I'm wearing a Red Bull top here, and you might think that I'm on Team Red Bull in this one, but like looking at this from the outset, or looking at, from, trying to be devil's advocate here, when you're looking at how the cars were going into that corner, Max did have that corner going into it. And then Russell, I really feel, was just a case of he got in behind Charles with that turbulent air, had a bit of a snap oversteer moment, or a little bit of oversteer. And then, of course, he hit into Max. But do you really feel, though, that like just even in that whole kind of combination of turn 1, turn 2, that sort of run off road, and then coming back on, do you really feel he should have given that place back? Do you think he was in the wrong? Or do you think it was just a case of, look, it was a racing incident, and then, yes, to kind of prevent possibly a penalty, just give the position back? Because I've heard people talking about this, saying that it was a fumble by GP or the Red Bull team on the pit wall. They were like, they shouldn't have actually just gone back there and said that. They should have just let the race go on and let them kind of battle it out.
I think that if Max had just give the place, that he would never do that. It's very difficult for him to just give places back. But if he had give the place back, maybe he would avoid the penalty. And I think Russell was not the one it was more a race incident. But if had Max just give the pace and let the steward decide if there was an issue, and maybe later Red Bull could just set a claim with the stewards to review the race and make another decision, it would have been a smarter decision than just let Max crash into Russell. And it was, I think Max was a bit lucky because if they both were took out, they just crash and Russell was the NF, Max was the NF. I think the penalty would be much more harsher than just the 10 seconds penalty.
Yeah, I do agree with that one, because I was a bit surprised that it was only 10 seconds, because we have seen situations like this before with other drivers and they've received penalty points on their license and all these other consequences and things like that. But I mean, ultimately, it just wasn't worth it, because even if you look at the Drivers' Championship right now, like, yes, I know Verstappen is still on 137 points, but every point counts, especially when you have George Russell coming in P4 and claiming those amount of points. Like, that is a gap that he could start to capitalize on and think to himself, like, this is from Russell's point of view. Okay, well, if I put a little bit of pressure on Max in these sort of scenarios, I could close in on P3. Like, that was just, it was such a foolish thing to do. Like, look, up until that point, before he just saw red and just obliterated Russell, I was Team Max on that one. I have to agree. I have to admit, I was Team Max. I thought he was a little bit, put out, because he has done the same thing to other drivers and he's received a penalty, but then he had the same thing done to him and nothing was really done about it. But I feel in that time when they got up to that corner where that incident happened, I feel that he didn't give enough time for the stewards to say, yes, Russell was in the wrong. Here's a penalty for Russell. You're now P4 and whatever. But it just dropped him all the way down to P10. 1 point to come out of such a great race, because if you look, he had a lot of great pace in that race. I mean, yes, he struggled a little bit at the beginning. Like, he was putting a little bit of pressure on Piastri at the start, but obviously he was instructed to kind of back off and kind of save those tires a little bit. But then he started to come back around sort of like lap 40. Like, he was putting pressure on both of the McLarens. But then to see all of that work just completely go out the window because of pure frustration. Like, there was other statements that were mentioned about this. We seen him in Imola, beautiful overtake there at turn 1. Like, remember that, Isidro, how incredible. That was such an amazing overtake, such beautiful. A great maneuver. But like, you see how incredible he is of a driver, but then we go to this scenario and it just puts him in such a bad spotlight. It really does. And it was such a pity because he was doing so well up until that point. And of course, with the whole safety car, yes, I think that's just when he started to see red. He was just getting frustrated with the pit wall, with the hard tires and all that kind of stuff. But one driver as well on Red Bull we do need to talk about is Yuki. He did start P19 because of obviously Lance Stroll. He didn't take part. Yuki did qualify P20, but then he started P19. But then he finished up P13. Yes, I want to give him credit and I say, yeah, look, that is somewhat of a good comeback drive, but you could see that he was struggling as well. Am I right in saying that, Isidro?
Yeah. He did the best he could with the car that he had this weekend, and considering everything he went, finishing P13 is not that bad. It looks bad when you are a Red Bull, but in the grand scheme of things and how it went this weekend, I think it's good that he finished P13.
Yeah, and I think, look, it's definitely a weekend to forget for the Red Bull camp and many of a Red Bull fan. But moving on from Red Bull and that whole incident, of course, look, we do have to talk about the rest of the teams. That wasn't just the only thing that happened in the race. Of course, we do need to talk about McLaren. Like, that performance from McLaren today, I mean, it just sort of felt reminiscent. I know obviously we did talk about Red Bull, we're moving on from them, but it really felt that it was just sort of like a reflective image of Red Bull back in 2023. You just seen Oscar out there controlling the whole race. He just he was a little bit under pressure when the soft tires started to cook up a little bit near the end of his first stint. But then you seen obviously like Norris going into turn 1 with Max. Like, of course, he had to concede to Max. He came back and that was it. Max was in his rearview mirror and he was gone off. But over the entire weekend, Isidro, how did you feel McLaren did?
I think McLaren was comfortable of going to Spain. They know the drivers. They have a good car. They were quite calm with this weekend. They know the drivers wouldn't be bumping into each other. It was just a quiet, calm weekend, and they provide a great race.
Yeah, they did for sure. And like, to be honest, I don't feel like there's much else to talk about, because when it comes to McLaren, they just delivered great results, great points. The actual pit crew did their job this weekend. They didn't ruin Piastri's race. They didn't ruin Norris's race. Even at that moment when the safety car came out there, what was it, lap 55 or something like that with Antonelli, you know, like they were going to double stack the McLarens. I was like, are they actually going to be able to do this? And they did it perfectly. Just been able to double stack the both of them, get back out, boom, both on soft tires. And there you go, P1 and P2. What a weekend for McLaren. And it's great to see it, because obviously, again, look, that just adds to the ever growing points that they have. And the constructors now sitting there, was it 362? Absolutely incredible. But then moving on, we do need to talk about Aston Martin, because yes, even though there was one driver on track with Fernando Alonso, he did actually have somewhat of a decent enough start. Like, yeah, I know he did lost a position. I think it was to Hulkenberg or Bortoletto or something at the first turn. But then he did actually have quite a good race. Like, he was getting a few overtakes done there throughout it. Like, he had some good race pace. But then all of a sudden, what was it, lap 15? He just fell off the track. He just, what happened there, Zidro? Like, even at that one point, I don't really feel that they actually covered the full incident. He was just off track. What was the situation with Alonso?
Yeah, I think it's that the issue that Aston Martin is not as stable as he is in qualifying. Alonso started very well. The Sauber was a surprise to see Hulkenberg passing by Alonso, and I think Lawson was also in the mix, so it was Asjar, I'm not sure.
Yeah,
and it was good to see Alonso fighting the places there, but then he kind of disappeared, like you're saying. That Aston Martin is definitely needs some adjustment, because it's doing well in the races and it's just disappear. But I'm happy that Alonso had made 2 points, and at least the home hero managed to finish on top 10. That's something that the home heroes always want, if they can, of course, get to the podium. At least be in the top 10 for the points.
Definitely. You know, like, finally, Fernando Alonso, his first couple of points of the season, and what we're almost coming up to somewhat halfway of the actual calendar, and he only has 2 points. Like, even though, like, we're saying, yay, finally some good news for Fernando, it's just so sad to see this happen, you know. But at least for the fans of Spain, at least they got to see one home hero actually get some points. But obviously,
all we needed for us to get points is Stroll to not be there.
Do you know what? That's what I was actually going to say. I think the actual charm of Aston Martin's whole season is just not to have Lance Stroll race. But like, yeah, like, look, I would love to go in and talk about the whole Stroll thing and why, but I don't want to. I really don't want to. I really don't feel it.
He doesn't need the airtime.
He doesn't need the airtime. He doesn't deserve the couple of minutes of this episode. He just had a sore hand. Boo boo. Whatever. Who cares? Stroll wasn't racing, but I think that's we all know that's their Achilles heel is Lance Stroll.
Even though Stroll is the only one until Spain to give points to Aston Martin.
I know, but this completely overshadows that, so don't mention that again, Isidro. We can see without Stroll, we have a good weekend, and we have drama and action and overtaking. It was brilliant. But look, moving on from Aston Martin, well, actually, just to clarify again, yes, Alonso, he did finish up P9, so he did claim 2 points on the table. But moving on, Ferrari. This weekend, Ferrari did actually have some really, really good pace. It's good to see the car, like, obviously from the first couple of races, they were having a lot of difficulty and so forth and so on. But then going into this weekend, especially with the tire deg and especially the heat of this track as well, Ferrari really did perform. But when you kind of look at the start of the race with Ferrari, Isidro, I really feel that Lewis Hamilton, Charles Leclerc battle was just so pointless. It was so silly to see Lewis defending that, because obviously he's getting communications over the radio being said, okay, look, Charles, he is faster. He can probably see the lap times. He's been told, look, Charles has done a 111 or 112 or 113. you're doing this. Like for a guy who's a professional race driver, I'm sure he can probably say to himself, oh, Charles is faster. But you see him going into these situations, into turn one, into turn two, like the really aggressive defensive Lewis Hamilton on Charles. And then eventually Ferrari are like swapped the positions, and then Charles just, went down the road. Do you think that was a little bit pointless? Because even in that situation, Hamilton was just wearing away his tires, trying to defend from his teammates. Like, I know obviously one of the statements that's always made about Formula One is that when you get to the top, your first rival or your ultimate rival is your teammate. But come on, guys, yous are not in any way situation or shape or form to be able to be in that situation. Yes, give yourselves some support. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I think it was a bit pointless for Hamilton to be fighting with Leclerc so soon and for nothing really, because the race is just starting. There's a lot of laps coming, and you're driving a Ferrari, and you never know what the pit wall will decide, or the pit crew will fail, or it's a usual clown show in Ferrari. So you should really not start fighting so soon, and just drive, focus on yourself, and just kept going.
Yeah, because you even seen there, like with Charles's pace, he was fast. He was very fast in that track today. And obviously, yeah, he had a little bit of difficulty from time to time, which every driver came into the same sort of situation. But for Ferrari, it's kind of a different sort of scenario. They struggle a lot when it comes to most tracks, but just this weekend, they just seem to be really, really fast. I seen that whole situation. I was like, Lewis, come on, man. Like, I know you're on the front cover of F125, but let your teammate through. You'll get your points eventually. But I mean, even going into that safety car restart, like we did briefly talk about it when it came to Max and Charles going down the main straight. I think even Charles, like he didn't want to admit it, but like you could even see when, I think it was David Coulthard, he was like, oh, you could even see at that point when Max and yourself touched, and he was like, yeah, and then I capitalized on that and it was good for me. Like that whole sort of safety car restart, obviously, yes, it did work well for Charles in the end, because yes, he did take home in P3, getting him on the podium and bringing home some good points for Ferrari. And then of course, look, Hamilton, he did finish on P6. But before we jump on to Mercedes, just a tiny little point. Do you kind of feel that Ferrari sort of snookered Hamilton with those early pit stops, or do you think, look, it was just a case of he just didn't have the overall performance on Charles?
I think Hamilton was just surprised to see a Sauber next to him most of the time on the race, and that kind of messed up his mental energy. He was like, "What's a Sauber doing here? What's happening? Where am I?
Am I in P17?
Distracted with that."
Yeah, I'm sure he was going on. What's happening? Am I at the back of the pack again? But look, moving on from Ferrari, we're going to tie that up in a little bow. They had a good weekend. Got some great, really good points there this weekend. But moving on to Mercedes, they definitely had a rough weekend, because we did see that in qualifying anyway. Yes, they did have a little bit of trouble with getting the cars up there into the top 10. But between Russell and Antonelli, I would love to talk about Antonelli's performance. But at the end of the day, his car just exploded there on lap 55. And of course, he DNF'd, which obviously brought out that safety car. But Russell, how do you feel Russell did? Because I was looking at the standings as the race was kind of going on, and I was looking at this and saying, I mean, is this just another weekend where Mercedes just want to forget about this? Like, Russell's performance didn't seem that great, but then out of nowhere, he's P4. Obviously, the whole thing with Verstappen and everything like that, but like, what do you think of Russell this weekend, Isidro? Do you think he struggled, or I mean, how did he get P4?
I think he had a great weekend. I mean, he got P4. He started on P4. He did almost the same time as Max Verstappen on the same 11.848. So
yeah,
he was on point for the qualifying, and the race that Mercedes had good pace. He had a good fight and survived the fight with Max, and he didn't finish far off from Leclerc. So I think Russell had a nice race. It was just exactly what he wanted.
Yeah, I think it's better that I kind of clarify that, because I think people listen to this will probably going, why are you saying he had a tough race, but he started P4? What I mean is that when you kind of look at the overall pace, when he dropped back behind Hamilton, he dropped back behind a couple of drivers, you could kind of see him complaining on the radio. And that's where I sort of felt like, okay, look, Russell's gone and he's out of this race. He's just going to be sitting back there in like P7 or P8, whatever. And he was having difficulty with trying to build up that gap to Hamilton, trying to catch him, but then it's just out of nowhere. I think, not to say I got bored, it's just when Antonelli DNF'd and everything started just going like, it was just chaos after that. I was like, where did Russell come from?
I think it also could be that the issues that Antonelli had with the engine, Russell could have some similar issues, but experience talk, and he was able just to get over it or just take care of it, some reset or something like that.
Yeah.
And Antonelli, not knowing the Mercedes as well, just got the engine blow up, and the DNF could be that as well.
Yeah, no, that is true. That is true. But definitely, I think it was another difficult weekend again, I think, for Antonelli anyway. But for Mercedes overall, kind of a weekend maybe to forget, but at least they can kind of go out this weekend saying that, yeah, look, we claimed some good points there. I mean, if you look at right now, they're third in the constructors. They're just literally behind Ferrari. Ferrari are sitting there at 165, Mercedes at 159. So very close battle there with Mercedes and Ferrari. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes into Canada between those two constructors. But then moving on, we have the Racing Bulls. We definitely have to quickly talk about King Dick, because oh my God, the aggressive driving from King Dick, Liam Lawson. He literally DNF'd Albon. I mean, Albon already had that the front wing change. He then comes out again, a couple of laps further. He then gets into sort of fisticuffs with Lawson, and then he gets his front wing completely obliterated by Liam Lawson's back right wheel. And then he had, I think he did get a penalty, or he got some sort of warning or something like that for hitting Behrman. I mean, like, overall, am I right in saying he was just way too aggressive this weekend? Am I right in saying that, Isidro?
Yeah, I think Lawson was a bit aggressive coming out from Monaco, where he did a great race. He was a good teammate, and this weekend he was all over the place, causing Albon to retire, the bumping into other guys. So that's not the Lawson that we want to be in this championship. He already got bumped out of Red Bull, and now he's in Red Bull Racing. So he needs to get his act together.
Definitely. And I mean, when you kind of look at it, like, overall, he ended up P11, didn't get any points for the team after all of that, what he probably believes hard work. But then you have Isaac Hadjar out there, incredible battles with Pierre Gasly and a few other drivers, like with Alonso and things like that. And he ended up coming in P6. I'm saying it again, Hadjar, keep him in your bingo card of drivers that's going to be up there in the future fighting for the championship, because that guy, he has just proved this season going into this that he is the business. And I really, really hope to see Hadjar getting some great points going into the future, and hopefully getting some podiums, because I feel that guy deserves to be on the podium at some stage this season. I really feel he does. But moving on from that, we want to dedicate some minutes of this episode to Kick Sauber. Let's talk about it. Hulkenberg, he started off in P15, and overall, wait for it, if you didn't see the race, P5. Hulkenberg, take a bow, mic drop. Oh my God, a Sauber with that amount of points. And if you kind of look at it now, overall, when it comes to the constructors, they have now overtaken Aston Martin and Alpine to take 8th in the constructors. I mean, that deserves a round of applause for Sauber. That is such a great performance for them. And then I know, obviously, Bortoleto, he did finish P12. Obviously, no points for him. But I mean, Isidro, I'm going to give the floor to you now. Let's just tell me what you thought of Sauber this weekend.
I think Sauber, they had a good weekend. The qualifying, the practice, we could see it was fast, and there was definitely some work being done. And today finished P5. It was a great result, especially for Hulkenberg. That he's a great driver, and it's a bit sad to see him finish last most of the time. I mean, it was awful to see Bottas driving the Sauber last year and
Yeah.
always finishing last.
Yeah.
And this weekend, Sauber, I'm not saying they were lucky, but definitely the safety car on the lap 55, it surely helped move Hülkenberg to the P5 position. He would definitely finish on points, but getting that P5 was even better.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that the Ferrari were surprised to see a Sauber between them. That doesn't happen quite often. So
No.
best weekend so far for Sauber. P5 and the P12.
Yeah, no, definitely 100%. Like, hats off to Sauber. Well done. What a great weekend. And hopefully we see more of this from Sauber, because I want to include them in our conversations here on the episodes. Hopefully it's not a case of that we don't hear to them for what, until like maybe Brazil or Qatar or something. Like, I don't know, but like, let's hope that we see some more performance from Sauber. That was amazing. So well done, guys. But then lastly, look, we won't really go into it too much. Williams, they did obviously have a very, very difficult weekend. We did talk about it, about qualifying and the whole car setup and everything. They had a difficult one. Albon, unfortunately, he DNF'd because of the result of the front wing damage with Liam Lawson. They just didn't have any more front wings in the pack of wings that they brought to Spain. It was just like, Albon, no more wings. Sorry, no more. All gone. Just come in, retire, mate. And then, of course, he retired the car on lap 28, which was such a disappointment. And then also as well, he did take that 10-second time penalty because he was, and I do agree, he was in the wrong with that one. He did lunge into Lawson, and that was obviously, he went off to the runoff and stuff like that. But he took that 10-second time penalty, then did the lap, came in, and then retired the car. Such a disappointment. And then lastly, Carlos Sainz, he finished up in P14. So definitely a weekend to forget if you are a Williams fan and for all of the Williams camp. So yeah, that was definitely a tough one from them. But that is basically the Spanish Grand Prix. It was an exciting one. I think it was a little bit disappointing, though, Isidro, to see that very controversial move from Verstappen at the end. I think it definitely put a bit of a downer on the overall result, because everyone was going into that and they were so delighted, like for Piastri and Norris and Leclerc, but it was just all the talk was about Max and George. It was just such a disappointment to see that. But folks, if you didn't see the race, Albon, as I said, he DNF'd because of Lawson. Antonelli, he brought out the safety car on lap 55. And then, of course, our least favorite Canadian, Lance Stroll, didn't even start the race because he had a sore hand. So that was the Spanish Grand Prix. But to go through the top 10, your top 10 finishers were Oscar Piastri in P1, Lando Norris P2, Charles Leclerc in P3, George Russell in P4, Nico Hülkenberg, let's go Hulk, in P5, Lewis Hamilton in P6, Isaac Hadjar in P7, we had Pierre Gasly in P8, we had Fernando Alonso in P9, and then to wrap up the top 10, we had Mr. Rage himself, Max Verstappen, in P10. So that was your top 10 finishers. That brings us on to our driver of the day, our dick of the day, and our loser of the day. Isidro, who is your DDL?
So for me, the driver of the day will be say Piastri, because he was flawless today. Right? And I know that it's kind of easy when you have that McLaren, but overall Piastri proved why he's on the top of the leaderboard for the World Drivers' Championship.
Yeah.
And for the loser, I wasn't sure between Albon and Antonelli, but I think I'm gonna say Antonelli, because Albon kind of create his own bad luck by ramming into Lawson. Antonelli, he's just got bad luck again. I mean, last week DNF, this week again DNF, so
yeah,
he would be the loser. And if someone's a dick, it will be Max Verstappen. He didn't have to crash into Russell, or just bump. He didn't really crash. It was just a little bump.
Yeah.
But, that's not pretty.
Yeah, no, it definitely wasn't. I do agree with those observations. But my driver of the day, I'm going to give it to Nico Hulkenberg. I did have Piastri, but you know what? When I seen Hulkenberg come in P5, like even the drivers in the cool down room, they were like, "Oh my god, Hulkenberg P5!" You know, so I have to give it to them. Hulkenberg, you get my driver of the day. Well done, buddy. It was great to see you up there in the top 10. My dick of the day. I'm bringing him back this weekend. I'm bringing him out. He is going to get the crown, the biggest crown in all of the land. King Dick himself, Liam Lawson, because, oh my God, that was so aggressive. Just all of those situations. Yes, I know the Albon incident was more Albon than Lawson, but he's a dick. And we're going to move on. Loser of the day, I'm going to give it to Max Verstappen. Yes, I know he was a bad boy for the whole George Russell incident, but I'm giving it to Max because, I mean, ultimately, when you look at that Red Bull pit wall strategy, giving him those hard tires. I mean, yeah, I know that was the only tires that he had left, but realistically, I think they should have just left him out there. I think they should have just left him on the softs, try and fight it, and even just try and keep either P3 or P4 or something. But, and then also as well, just that call to swap the positions back. Personally, I'm on Team Verstappen on the initial part of that incident. I feel he was done wrong. I don't think he should have given the position back. I think that was stupid for the pit wall to say, just give it back to them or give it to Russell and then swap them back. I just think he was a little bit hard done by up until that point when he turned into an absolute 5-year-old child and started throwing his toys out of the pram and ran straight into him. Like even Russell made the comment. He was like, I've done that move before. And then everyone looked at him and he was like, in Mario Kart. So definitely my loser of the day is Max. But folks, that brings us on to our predictions game for Spain. So obviously the guys did send in their predictions last week, so we will run through them. Dave, he had Norris in P1, Piastri in P2, and Verstappen in P3. And obviously all of us were looking at that going, we have the three drivers up there in the top three, but then when Verstappen obviously decided to turn into a 5-year-old, that threw him out of all of our predictions. So unfortunately, that was 0 points there for each of those. But he did have Lawson outside the top 10. So Dave does get a point for that. And he also had Russell inside the top 10. So Dave walks out of that with 2 points. Owen had Piastri in P1, which he did get right. Norris in P2, which he did get right. But unfortunately, Max in P3, which he did get wrong. Now, he had Ocon outside the top 10, which was correct, but he had Antonelli inside the top 10. So unfortunately, but he does get a lot of points this weekend. Owen does get 3 points. Isidro, run me through your predictions.
So I had Max in P1, Piastri in P2, and Norris in P3. What a mess.
It was looking like it at one stage.
Yeah. At least when Max in the turn one, he went from P4 to P2 or P3 to P2, but well, that's 0. Then I had Ocon outside top 10.
Yep.
And I had Russell inside top 10. So
boom, there you go. 2 points.
I'm coming back like Sauber.
That's it. You're coming back like Sauber, Isidro. There we go. Now, Isidro, I had something similar to you from last weekend when we ran through our predictions. I had Max in P1, Piastri in P2, and Norris in P3. I thought that was actually going to happen this weekend, but of course, we know how that went. So I got 0 points for all of those. But I did have Lawson outside the top 10. So thank you, King Dick, bringing me that lovely point. And then I also had Russell inside the top 10. So I also picked up 2 points this weekend. So Dave and yourself, Isidro, and me are all on 2 points. Owen's on 3. But Damien did send in his predictions. He had Piastri in P1, Norris in P2, and then Max in P3. So 2 points from that. But then he had Lawson outside the top 10 and then Russell inside the top 10. So Damien walks out of this weekend with 4 points. So Damien definitely wins this weekend. Now, real quick, what we'll do is we'll talk about what the standings are like right now. So looking at the table, Damien still has that demanding lead with 17 points. He's there in P1. Owen is there with his 14 points in P2. Myself and Dave, we are claiming P3 there, joint P3 with our 10 points. And then Isidro, you're on on 7 points. But my God,
Sauber.
the Sauber, but you are coming back. You are coming back, which then leads us into next weekend where we all could make up some good points. Or not next week, sorry, the following weekend, because Canada is in a fortnight's time. We do have the Canadian GP. Now, Dave and Owen did send in their predictions. Dave does have Norris, Piastri, and Russell to be P1, P2, and P3. Then his flop is Hülkenberg outside the top 10. And then his surprise is Sainz inside the top 10. Owen has his predictions. He has Piastri, Norris, and Verstappen in his P1, P2, and P3. And then he has Gasly outside the top 10. And then Sainz inside the top 10. Everyone's looking at Sainz this weekend. And I think that's a good card to play. Isidro, what are your predictions?
My prediction would be Piastri P1, Norris P2, and Leclerc P3.
Oh, going with a little bit of a Spanish Spanish mirroring imaging thing, or a replication, whatever the word is, the correct phrase that I'm trying to get out of my brain here while I'm writing this down.
And the flop will be Hülkenberg outside top 10. That's a given.
Yeah.
I might be wrong though, never know. But yeah, Hülkenberg outside top 10.
I mean this in the nicest way. I hope he's not inside the top 10.
And surprise Sainz inside top 10.
Okay, so everyone's playing the Sainz card this weekend. Okay.
Safe card.
Yeah, I think it is. It definitely is. For my predictions, look, I'm going to do it. I'm going to go Piastri. I'm going to go Norris. Do you know what? I'm not writing Max out. I'm going to give him a P3. I'm going to give him my P3. I think he's been very, very strong around Canada before. So I have a feeling this is what it will be like. I feel he's on a mission to get some sort of comeback from Spain. So I think he could possibly have a P3 here. Not enough to fight the McLarens though. The McLarens definitely will have some good performance, but I think he will come back for a P3. Do you know what? I'm gonna copy you. I'm sorry. I'm going to have to do it. Hülkenberg, I'm going to say outside the top 10. I think that was the card that I think everyone should play. Like, I know Owen has Gasly outside the top 10, but I think it's Hülkenberg. I think that's the card to play for the flop there. Sorry, I just want to clarify that. So outside the top 10, just in case next week we go, oh, you said he was inside the top 10. And then my surprise, who thought it was going to be a surprise? Sainz inside the top 10. Now, unfortunately, Damien wasn't able to put his predictions in, but he will obviously try and get his predictions in during the week, just in time for the Canadian GP. So we will run through his predictions when we do record our fortnight's time podcast when we're talking about Canada. But that is everything. That's all our predictions. Definitely an interesting one. That table is starting to come closely together now. Hopefully, we see you pick up some extra points there, Isidro, and you're there with me and Dave. But yeah, folks, look, that was the Spanish GP. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below on the whole Max and George situation. We'd love to know your analysis on that as well. Let us know if you're watching this on YouTube or Spotify. Just let us know your opinions on that one. Do you think Max was in the wrong? Do you think he should have been given that penalty? Ultimately, yes, I do believe he did. But do you think, what was your opinion? That's all we want to know. What was your opinion on that one? But Isidro, thank you so much for joining me today. It was great to talk to you about Spain. Anything else you want to cover before we wrap up today?
Welcome back to Sauber. Welcome to the points.
That's it. Welcome back, Sauber. But yeah, folks, thank you so much for listening to today's episode. Definitely make sure to hit that like button, hit subscribe wherever you're listening to this. And then, as I said before, look, let us know your thoughts in the comments below. But until next time, enjoy the lovely 2-week break, and we will catch you, what was it, mid-June or something like that, for Oh Canada. Adios.